Welcome back, everyone. And this week I have, as you see, there's two people there, and here they are, Brian and Melanie Wasko. And I've gotten to know them through the homeschool convention market, but I'm getting to know them even more through their company, WriteAtHome, WriteAtHome.com. And Brian and Melanie, they founded the company, they started the company. Brian is the president of the company. Go, Brian. And what you want to know about Brian and Melanie, they have 4 grown children. They've been in homeschooling for 30 years. So they've homeschooled their kids all the way from kindergarten, all the way through high school, completing high school, and off into their after the world after high school and what that looks like. So today we've got people that work with curriculum and people that work with homeschool families and people that are homeschool families themselves. So I can't, wow, it's amazing that you guys are here. But so you know more about Brian and Melanie, what have they done? How have they done over those last 30 years? So they've written their own program and their own curriculum. But you think about how did that look and how to get started? And Brian and I would probably have a similar past. Where we got started was working in co-ops. And then what happens? Well, then you go from organizing co-ops to organizing local classes. From organizing local classes, what happens? You start going to conventions. And Brian, how I met Brian is Brian was the keynote speaker, and we met the first time in Alaska. And I got to listen to him. I was on the other side of the wall listening to him speak. He's amazing. So their classes are for middle and high school students. And Brian's even created his own literature program called Wasko Lit for high school students. So Brian teaches those Wasko Lit classes online, and he and Melanie both run the WriteAtHome program. So you guys, I'm so excited that you're here. Super fun, because I know we're starting to get to know each other even more and looking at some things we can do together. So the first thing is 30 years ago, right? You know, homeschooling was not really kind of on the radar, on the map. It wasn't very popular. You know, it was popular in some, but it was kind of quiet, right? It was kind of a new thing emerging, right? So how did you get started in homeschooling? Like, what made you decide that's what you need to do with your kids?
You want to go?
Sure. We started out as a young married couple saying that we'd never homeschool our kids.
That's how all homeschooling families get started.
We thought we just did not get it. We both came from a really positive public high school experience. And so we were like, that's just strange. Like, why would we do that? But we became acquainted with a bunch of families who homeschooled, and we were so impressed with their kids. And it wasn't just that they were really smart. They were also really personable and fun and friendly. And they had all this great family dynamic and great times with their families. So we decided we would at least start checking it out. So we started asking questions and went to a convention when I think our oldest was maybe 3 or 4 to find out more about that. And then at the same time, Brian started teaching a writing class in a homeschool co-op. And he was also a public high school teacher at the time. And the difference in the caliber of the kid mainly in the sense of effort and wanting to learn and like doing their work was so drastic that was just another factor in us deciding we should pursue learning more about it.
Right. I'll never forget the first day I taught this co-op writing class. You know, we were working with the youth group at our church, and there were a lot of homeschoolers in our community, which was brand new to us at the time. And honestly, we thought it was really weird. But these kids were really pretty amazing. And so parents asked me to teach a writing class after school. So I would finish the school day 1 day a week and then go to the co-op and meet with these homeschool high school kids. And I still remember the first day of class, I taught this, opening lesson on writing skills, and gave them a writing assignment, and the class was over. And as the students stood up to leave, they said, "Thank you, Mr. Wasko." And one after the other, they all thanked me. And I sincerely said, "For what?" And they said, for teaching us today. And I thought, at that point, I had been teaching in a public school for 5 or 6 years. And I had never one time ever heard a student thank me for teaching a class. I remember coming home and telling Melanie, "You'll never guess what happened at the end of class today." She said, "What?" I said, "They thanked me." And she said, "Do you remember?" "For what?" "For teaching the class." And it was kind of a turning point. I thought there's something different about these kids, the way they were raised, and it began to appeal to us at that point. Yeah.
That is amazing. I'm thinking back. So I was a public school teacher for years, and And I look back and I'm thinking, how often did that happen? And there's a very, they always, what they say, the exception proves the rule, right? I can think of a couple of times here and there where someone said, thank you.
Maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's amazing. I think about, like, I just did some live classes this week, right? And as we're signing off, and usually what I'll do is at the end, we'll let everybody say bye to each other, right? Well, they're saying bye, but what they're saying is they're saying, thank you for class. And that's really amazing. I took that for granted, right? Because I'm so used to that, right? And you were like caught surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm used to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just must be because you're super cool. You got that going on too, right?
Well, that's obvious.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So you work with with kind of the same population that I like to work with, which is that middle school and high school age student. And I found for me, like, I love that age group. I love kind of like what they're looking at in life, and they're starting to really kind of process things and come up with their own unique thoughts and expressions, and and really, like, they're kind of out there, right? And that's they kind of get to me where it's like, I love that, because I love that they're kind of in that space. So you're looking now, and you work with middle school and high school students. What advice do you have for the homeschooling middle school and high school students? Like, what do you tell them?
It's good. Mel, why don't you answer that? You're good at that. For parents of homeschool.
Oh, for parents or for the students?
Well, probably both. Let's start. Which one, like, what pops in your mind quickest? Like, what advice you have for students, or what advice you have for parents? Probably parents, because parents are wondering. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Let's start there.
So I would say, so we have 4 daughters, and there's only 5 years from the oldest to the youngest. So they were, you kind of felt like they're all the same age growing up. And one of the things that we were real intentional about is making sure that we did all we could to prohibit them from comparing themselves to one another, but really kind of leaning into and recognizing how they're uniquely made and uniquely gifted. So I would say that's one thing is, like, we were always kind of on the lookout for what they naturally gravitated toward, or what they were good at, whether it was empathizing with people, or being able to problem solve, or being able to understand a literary concept, but like always making it an issue that we would always encourage one another in how we were different. And I think as they're older now, they're all out of college except for one who's still in college. They all kind of are on different paths, but really appreciate one another. So I think if you have, especially if you have more than one student, I would say that's important, is not to get them into a box checking mentality where there's only one way to be successful, or one way to thrive or flourish. I heard Deborah Bell speak once, and she just said this one line, and it really pivoted the way I parented. And she said, giftings are clues to callings. So we've always just talked about that with our kids. Like, what are you gifted at? What do you like? What seems to come natural? And then maybe look at like callings or vocations that would have something to do with that. And then the second thing is we always encouraged hard work above natural giftedness, because that just gets you farther. Like, if you can learn something because you have the ability to work hard, it's a much better thing than thinking you're smart and then getting overwhelmed when you don't immediately get something. So those would be 2 tips.
I like those. Yeah. Very good. So how would you transition that to young people? Like, what would you say the advice to our middle school and high schoolers that are that they may not be listening right now, but moms are going to go say, hey, you guys, you need to listen to this right now, this one part, because this is advice for you.
Yeah. I think what I would say is that's something that just happens whether you like it or not in those middle and high school years is there's this identity creation, right? Students are figuring out who they are, which is why I really love those years, right? It's figuring out how I've been uniquely made and what I'm uniquely gifted to do and become. So students are at that age just constantly thinking, where am I going in life, and who am I going to be? And so encouraging those kinds of questions, I think, is really important. It's helping students figure out who they are. What happens in those years is there's this this sort of parting from their parents. So there's this more and more of a unique identity is being formed in each of our kids. which is very painful sometimes for parents to watch that happen, right? That when they're much younger, they're much better at conforming to what mom and dad think, and they agree with us about everything, and they just sort of follow our lead. And as they begin maturing through those middle and high school years, they become more independent, and they start rethinking things. They start pushing back and arguing maybe, and thinking through things, creating their own opinions. They start thinking about style and look and appearance because they begin realizing they're their own unique individual. And so embracing that as parents is really important, and helping ask the questions that will help students identify who they are, pointing all the time to their gifts, because I think a bad tendency that we all have is to focus on what we are not, what we can't be, and what we can't do. It can lead to discouragement, frustration. That happens a lot. So encouraging what kids are really good at, and then helping to point them towards what that can cause them to be one day. And I think thinking big is really important. One of the things I think we've done well with our kids is to help them believe from a young age that they're difference makers, that what they choose in their younger years will help lead them into a place where they can make a difference in the world, where they can help people, they can change things that they're frustrated with. Not just think in terms of, well, what's going to make me happy with my little family, but how can I help people and do something that matters in the world? So
I love that. That's in the back of your mind for both of you when you're creating courses and you're leading classes. That's already in the back of your mind. Is like, what's there for young people is, well, how are you going to make a difference in the world? And you're like writing programs to support young people in being able to make a difference. I think that's amazing. I heard a statistic one time that they had done surveys, and they had done it in 7 different languages and 7 different cultures around the world. And they came back with the number one thing that people, human beings, like adults, kids, all that they had one thing in common. And that one thing that they had in common across all cultures is that people just want to make a difference.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, right? So that's it. That's really interesting to me. Brian, you said something that gave me some advice to give back to young people. It's just so great. And that is that, if you're a young person, if you're listening to this right now, thank your parents. Really tell them thank you. Because you can hear even Brian and Melanie as being homeschool parents, not only curriculum writers, but homeschool parents. Like just looking at there's so many different things. And I think one of the things, and I know I look at it for myself as being in our own homeschool family, one of the things we always are confronting is that we don't want to mess our kids up. We want them to be able to discover who they are and be able to be those people that are out there making a difference. And sometimes for us as parents, it's scary, because we don't always know if we're right or not. But what we are doing is we just keep that ball moving forward. So young people, for me, it's like, tell your parents thank you, because it's, what we're doing is it takes something. So that's awesome. Melanie, I was interrupting you. You were going to say something else. What were you going to say about advice for young people?
Oh, I was just going to say that I would want all young people to know that they have something worthwhile to contribute and to say, and to not, and also that it's normal in middle school and high school to feel insecure and uncertain, and almost like you have a different opinion every day. That's just part of growing up. And to be comfortable with indecision and with the process that, you don't grow up overnight. It's a process, and just to try to be comfortable with that as you get to know yourself, and, be willing to try things that you maybe wouldn't necessarily gravitate toward, and to be good listeners, not to your parents, but also to your friends, and just to be curious and to be learners, and not to discount something because you don't know about it or because your friends don't like it, but just to be open to figuring out who you are. And again, being outside of a box a lot of times.